There are 3 truths I've learned about interstellar diplomacy. First, if you're invited, it's probably a mistake. Second, if it isn't a mistake, you're the mistake. And third, if someone tells you, just stand there and don't say anything, that's exactly when history decides to happen. I was currently living through all 3. The palace of the Varelian crown made Earth's most ambitious architecture look like someone's first attempt at stacking bricks. It wasn't built, it flowed. Walls curved upward like frozen ribbons of moonlight. The ceiling shimmered with bioluminescent constellations that rearranged themselves in slow, dignified patterns. Even gravity felt curated, slightly lighter than standard, as if the building itself didn't want to burden royalty with unnecessary weight. And there I stood. Human. 6 feet of evolutionary compromise in a tailored diplomatic uniform that fit like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen shoulders before. To be clear, I wasn't a diplomat. I was a systems tactician temporarily reassigned because someone in command believed technical transparency fosters trust. Apparently, that meant parking a human analyst in the middle of a reception hosting over 200 alien dignitaries and hoping no one asked complicated questions about military infrastructure. Around me, the galaxy glided. Varelians were tall and silver-limbed, their skin reflecting soft opaline hues depending on emotion. They moved with deliberate grace, long fingers tipped in delicate crystalline filaments. Every gesture looked rehearsed. Every posture conveyed centuries of cultural refinement. Beside them stood delegates from worlds I'd only studied in briefings, tall insectoid Cthari with polished obsidian exoskeletons, amphibious Thulrine nobles draped in translucent ceremonial veils, and at least 3 species that defied quick anatomical categorization. And then there was me. Standing rigid. Trying not to fidget. Running structural stress calculations on the chandelier out of boredom. I adjusted my collar. It adjusted back. I suspected it was sentient. At the far end of the hall, elevated slightly above the gathering, stood her radiance, the Varelian sovereign, Queen Serelith. She did not move unnecessarily. Her presence wasn't loud. It was gravitational. Silver diadem arcing like a crescent star above her brow, robes cascading in layered iridescence that shifted like liquid mercury. Her eyes, bright, faceted, assessing, missed nothing. When she inclined her head toward a speaker, it felt less like acknowledgement and more like permission to continue existing. If diplomacy were a weapon, she carried it sharpened. To her right stood her daughter, Princess Aelira. Unlike her mother, she moved. Subtle shifts. Weight transferring. Fingers flexing against the silk-like material of her formal attire. Her gaze didn't glide across the room in controlled arcs, it darted. Curious. Restless. Where the queen radiated composure, the princess radiated containment. Her expression remained properly neutral, but her eyes lingered too long on things that weren't politically relevant. The musicians suspended midair in harmonic fields, the Earth delegation's data slates, the architecture's microfractals. And once, briefly, on me. I looked away first. Survival instinct. The reception continued with ceremonial efficiency. Speeches layered over harmonic resonance fields so translations whispered directly into neural implants. Trade alliances reaffirmed. Cultural exchanges praised. Mutual non-aggression treaties polished into gleaming public promises. I stood exactly where I'd been told to stand. I nodded when others nodded. I did not speak. Truth number 4, unofficial, but statistically reliable. When a room is too perfect, it's unstable. There's a frequency to silence before something breaks. A shift in micro-expressions. A change in breathing rhythms. The princess' shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Her gaze drifted again, past ambassadors, past military attaches, past the ring of ceremonial guards, and settled on me. Longer this time. The queen was mid-address, her voice smooth as flowing crystal. 200 diplomats stood in attentive stillness. Even the bioluminescent constellations above dimmed slightly, synchronized to her cadence. I felt it before I understood it. The air changed. A microsecond of decision. A single intake of breath from somewhere to my right. And in the corner of my peripheral vision, movement. There's a particular kind of silence that only exists right before disaster. It isn't loud. It isn't obvious. But if you've worked around unstable reactors long enough, you recognize the hum. Princess Aelira's breathing changed. I noticed because I wasn't making eye contact with anyone and had resorted to counting ambient oscillations in the ceiling lattice. Her posture stiffened, not in royal poise, but in recognition. Like someone spotting a familiar face in an impossible place. Her gaze locked onto me. Not curious. Not diplomatic. Certain. The Queen, Queen Seralith, continued speaking, voice smooth and resonant, discussing interstellar harmony and mutual prosperity. 200 dignitaries listened in reverent stillness. Princess Aelira took one step forward. A guard subtly shifted. She took another. That was when the nearest attendant whispered something urgent in her direction. She didn't respond. Instead, she ran. Not glided. Not hurried. Ran. Silk layers lifted. Silver filaments shimmered. The crystalline floor amplified each footfall in a series of sharp, echoing reports that sliced clean through her mother's speech. 200 diplomats turned as one organism. The Queen stopped speaking mid-sentence. The harmonic translation field flickered. I had exactly half a second to process the fact that the alien princess was sprinting directly at me before she closed the distance. Every possible scenario ran through my brain. Assassination attempt. Political theater. I'd spilled something earlier and hadn't noticed. She didn't slow down. She didn't hesitate. She crashed into me with enough force to knock the breath out of my lungs and wrapped both arms around my torso. Not a diplomatic clasp. Not a formal gesture. A full, unrestrained, desperate hug. The palace froze. Literally. The bioluminescent ceiling constellations halted mid-pattern. Conversations died mid-breath. Somewhere behind me, something metallic clattered to the floor and no one dared pick it up. Her grip tightened. Her voice, soft but unmistakable, vibrated against my chest. It's you. I did what any highly trained representative of humanity would do in that situation. I stopped functioning. My arms hovered awkwardly in the air like I'd forgotten how limbs worked. My brain rebooted 3 times and came back with the same error message. This was not in the briefing. It's me. I echoed faintly, because when confronted with galactic-scale social catastrophe, clarification feels productive. She pulled back just enough to look up at me. Her eyes, bright, luminous, weren't restless anymore. They were relieved. You came back, she said. Came back. I had never been here before in my life. Behind us, the sound of fabric shifting echoed through the chamber. The Queen rose. Princess Aelira did not let go. The motion of the monarch standing was subtle, controlled, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Guards straightened. Diplomatic aides went pale in species-appropriate ways. Queen Seralith descended the steps of the dais slowly. Each footstep was measured. Precise. If anger were electricity, she was currently a power grid operating within safe parameters, barely. "Princess," she said calmly. That single word carried more force than a fleet deployment. Aelira didn't move. Her fingers tightened slightly in the fabric of my uniform. 200 pairs of alien eyes drilled into me. I became acutely aware of my breathing. My heartbeat. The fact that my left hand was still hovering uselessly in midair. I gently, carefully, lowered it. "I assure your radiance," I began, voice attempting diplomacy and achieving mild panic. "This is almost certainly a misunderstanding of astrophysical proportions." The Queen stopped 3 steps away. Her gaze settled on me fully for the first time. Assessment. Calculation. Something else. "Human," she said evenly. "You will release my daughter." I hadn't been holding her. Before I could respond, the princess spoke again, quieter now but unwavering. "No." The silence deepened. Queen Seralith's eyes flickered, just briefly, with something unreadable. Then she straightened. "You," she said, addressing me directly, "will attend a private audience." There it was. The execution chamber invite. Immediately, the guards parted. The princess finally loosened her grip, but only slightly, as if reluctant to let reality resume its previous shape. My brain supplied one final, unhelpful thought. Truth number 5, if royalty summons you privately after a public incident, it's never for refreshments. and as I followed the most dangerous being in the room toward a corridor lined with armed ceremonial sentinels, I realized I had absolutely no idea why an alien princess thought I'd come back. The doors to the private chamber sealed behind us with a sound that felt unnecessarily final. No guards inside. No diplomats. Just high, arching walls of pale crystal and a single circular platform in the center of the room. The lighting dimmed to a soft lunar glow. Queen Serelith turned slowly. Princess Aelira stood beside me now, not clinging, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her silver-toned skin. I, meanwhile, was calculating escape routes. There were none. "Human," said Queen Serelith, her voice controlled but edged with something sharper beneath. "Explain." No wasted syllables. Efficient. Terrifying. "With respect, Your Radiance," I began carefully, hands clasped behind my back to prevent nervous gesturing, "I am attempting to do exactly that." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not anger. Analysis. "My daughter," she continued, "has spoken of a human for several cycles. She described resilience. Patience. A strange humor. She insisted she would know him if she saw him again." My brain performed a hard reboot. "Again?" I echoed faintly. Princess Aelira stepped forward, her composure dissolving into open enthusiasm now that we were out of public view. "You fixed it," she said quickly, as if afraid I might deny reality itself. "The gravity stabilizer on the lower garden platform. It malfunctioned. Everyone panicked. Memory clicked into place. 3 weeks ago. Informal tour of the outer palace structures. Minor mechanical fault. I'd been temporarily assigned to evaluate their energy lattice integration." "Yes," I said slowly. "That." The Queen's gaze sharpened. "You were present during the malfunction." "Yes, Your Radiance. And you addressed my daughter directly." I winced internally. That sounded incriminating. "She was standing closest to the unstable field generator," I explained. "Everyone else was issuing instructions." "She looked," I paused, searching for the least offensive phrasing. "Concerned." Princess Aelira nodded vigorously. "They were arguing about evacuation protocols." "It was a minor fluctuation," I said. 4.7% deviation. Loud, but not catastrophic. I recalibrated the harmonic balance manually. The Queen's expression didn't change. "And you spoke to her?" "Yes, Your Radiance." "What did you say?" I hesitated. Princess Aelira answered for me, smiling. "It's okay. It's just confused. Machines do that sometimes." The silence that followed was different from the public one. Softer. The Queen's gaze shifted subtly. I added awkwardly, asked if she was all right." The princess turned toward her mother. "No one asked." That landed heavier than any accusation. I cleared my throat. It seemed statistically appropriate. "You told me," Aelira continued, eyes bright, "you don't have to stand perfectly still all the time. Nothing's going to explode today." I blinked. "I did not say it like that." "You did," she insisted gently. "And you smiled." The Queen studied me in silence. "You did not know her identity," she said at last. "No, Your Radiance." I spread my hands slightly. She introduced herself as Aelira. No title. No escort markings. I assumed she was an engineer. The princess beamed. The Queen did not. But something shifted. "You treated her as an equal." "I treated her as a person near unstable machinery," I corrected reflexively. "Which, in my experience, is when people most require calm." Princess Aelira stepped closer to her mother. "He wasn't afraid of me," she said quietly. The Queen's gaze flickered, just briefly, with something that wasn't suspicion anymore. Understanding. "She has been," the Queen began carefully, "isolated." "Mother," Aelira warned gently. "For security," Serelith corrected. "For stability." I kept very still. Royal family dynamics were not in my training manual. "She spoke of you frequently," the Queen said at last. "The human who did not bow. Who did not calculate advantage. Who did not treat her as fragile crystal." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I was recalibrating a field coil, I offered weakly. Princess Elira laughed softly. The queen regarded me for a long moment. The tension in her posture eased, not fully, but enough. You caused disruption today, she said. Yes, your radiance. You embarrassed this court. Yes, your radiance. You are either dangerously manipulative or profoundly unaware. I considered that. Statistically, the latter. Silence. Then, the faintest curve touched the corner of the queen's mouth. Curiosity had replaced suspicion. At present, she continued, my daughter appears unwilling to resume her former emotional confinement. Elira straightened, hopeful. The queen folded her hands. You will remain, she said. I blinked. Remain. Temporarily, she clarified. As a technical consultant assigned to palace infrastructure. My brain attempted to process the implications. You will not exploit this proximity, she added calmly. You will not disrupt court protocol further. Understood. And you will, she finished, eyes narrowing slightly, continue to treat her as though she is simply Elira. The princess's breath caught softly. I swallowed. Yes, your radiance. The queen inclined her head once. Then welcome back to the palace, human. And just like that, my accidental act of basic decency had been upgraded to a royal appointment. Royal temporary assignment turned out to mean two things. I now had access to the most advanced energy infrastructure in the known sectors. I was being watched by at least 12 discrete security units at all times. The palace maintenance wing was less glamorous than the ceremonial halls, but infinitely more interesting. Living crystal conduits pulsed with controlled stellar energy. Gravity regulators hummed in harmonic layers. The Varelians didn't just build technology. They cultivated it. I was elbow-deep in a resonance stabilizer, running diagnostics through a floating interface, when I sensed someone behind me. I was told this area is restricted. I didn't look up. It is. A pause. Then you are in violation. Constantly, I replied. Silence. Then a small, poorly concealed smile in the air behind me. I turned. Princess Elira stood in formal academic robes, clearly mid-lesson escape. Two hovering attendants lingered several meters back, pretending not to exist. You're skipping instruction, I said. They were discussing trade tariffs. That sounds important. It is profoundly repetitive. Fair. She stepped closer to the open panel, eyes lighting up at the exposed energy lattice. What does this one do? It prevents the western wing from floating into orbit. Her eyes widened slightly. Truly? No. She narrowed her gaze. You are doing the humor again. Only a minor dosage. I shifted aside so she could see the oscillation diagram. This regulates harmonic drift. Think of it like tuning an instrument. An instrument. Yes. If one string pulls too tight, the entire melody distorts. She studied the waveform carefully. So the palace must remain in balance. Exactly. And if someone refuses to move, she asked thoughtfully, the structure compensates around them? I glanced at her. That depends, I said. Is the someone important to the structure? She considered that seriously. I am told I am. There it was. Not arrogance. Wait. I softened my tone. Even important components need recalibration sometimes. She leaned closer. Show me. So I did. I explained phase variance using water ripples. Compared energy surges to weather systems. Reduced advanced gravitic mathematics into analogies involving stacked stones and stubborn cats. She absorbed it instantly. Not just memorizing, understanding. Why do you simplify? She asked suddenly. Because complex things aren't impressive, I replied. Clear things are. Behind us, one of her official tutors made a strangled noise. We must return to formal curriculum, Your Highness, the tutor insisted. Elira didn't move. But this is curriculum, she said calmly. The tutor looked at me like I'd personally destabilized the monarchy. Which, statistically, might have been accurate. Later that afternoon, I was intercepted in a corridor lined with archival light columns. The Chancellor waited. Tall, severe, draped in layered obsidian fabrics that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. His gaze assessed me with bureaucratic precision. "You are altering her schedule," he said without greeting. "I am repairing infrastructure. You are encouraging deviation. I am answering questions." His eyes sharpened slightly. "She has not asked questions in months." That gave me pause. "She completes every expectation," he continued. "Stands where told. Speaks when instructed. Learns flawlessly." "That sounds ideal," I said carefully. "It is not," he replied. Silence stretched between us. "She has been alone in plain sight," he said more quietly. "You are the first individual in this palace who speaks to her without anticipating future advantage." "I'm not suicidal," I muttered. A flicker, almost amusement, crossed his expression. "She laughed today," he added, "during a structural analysis." "That's highly inappropriate," I said gravely. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." He stepped aside, allowing me to pass. "Do not mistake tolerance for blindness, human," he warned. "Wouldn't dream of it." "But," he finished, voice lowering slightly, "continue." That evening, from across the grand atrium, I noticed something subtle. Queen Seralith stood at the balcony edge, observing the lower gardens. Below, Princess Aelira walked beside me, not in rigid formation, not reciting policy, but animated, gesturing as she debated whether energy lattices could be adapted for planetary climate stabilization. She was smiling. Not restrained. Not rehearsed. Real. The Queen's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Not suspicion. Not control. Recognition. And for the first time since I'd arrived, the palace didn't feel quite so fragile. The summons came at twilight. The palace balconies overlooked a horizon that shimmered in layered violets and deep indigo, the planet's rings casting luminous arcs across the sky. Wind moved softly through suspended crystal chimes, producing tones too low to be music, too precise to be random. Queen Seralith stood at the edge, hands folded behind her back. No guards. No attendants. Just a ruler and the open sky. "You understand," she said without turning, "that she is changing." I stepped beside her, careful to maintain respectful distance. "Yes, your radiance." She questions more. That's healthy. She challenges instruction. That's growth. Now she turns slightly, studying me in profile. "She laughs," the Queen said quietly. That one carried weight. "Yes," I replied. "She does." The wind shifted. Below us, distant lights from the lower gardens glowed like scattered stars. "For cycles," Seralith continued, "my daughter has prepared for inevitability. Duty. Alliance. Strategic union." Her voice remained steady, but something beneath it strained. She accepted isolation because she believed it necessary. "And now?" I asked carefully. "Now she looks beyond the palace walls." Silence settled between us. "She speaks of engineering reforms," the Queen added. "Of travel. Of observing other systems directly. That sounds like curiosity, not rebellion." "To a sovereign," she said softly, "curiosity can become rebellion." I considered that. "With respect," I said, "she's not fragile crystal." "No," Seralith agreed. "She is not." Another pause. "You will leave eventually," the Queen said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. "I'm a temporary consultant," I answered. "That was the agreement." "And when you do," she continued, eyes returning to the horizon, "she will remain." There it was. Not political concern. Maternal fear. "Attachment," she said quietly, "is a risk rulers cannot afford." I watched the rings shift in the sky. "She's happy now," I said. The words felt simple. Almost inadequate. But true. The Queen studied me differently then, not as a potential threat, not as an unpredictable variable. As a man. "You speak as though the present outweighs the future." "Sometimes it does." Her gaze lingered. "You care for her," she observed. Care was a complicated word in a palace built on consequence. "I respect her," I said carefully. "And I don't treat her like a symbol." The faintest exhale left her. "That," she murmured, "may be why she trusts you." The wind grew cooler. Far below, I could see a familiar silver figure moving along the garden paths, pausing to examine a newly installed energy conduit we'd recalibrated earlier. "She has begun asking about Earth," the Queen said. My stomach tightened slightly. "That's new." "She asked what it would feel like," Serelith continued, "to walk somewhere no one recognizes her." The implication hung in the air. "This peace," the Queen added softly, "is fragile." I followed her gaze outward, past the palace, past the rings, toward distant stars. Something in her tone had shifted. Not fear. Warning. "There are forces," she said, "that will not welcome change." And as the last light of their sun dipped beneath the horizon, I understood. This wasn't merely about happiness. It was about what happiness would cost. The alarms didn't scream, they calculated. Soft harmonic pulses ran along the palace lattice, triggering a subtle vibration in every crystal panel. Anyone unfamiliar would have assumed it was ambient. I knew better. The oscillations indicated a targeted breach in the northern sector, Princess Aelira's current location. I ran diagnostics before panic could set in. Energy fields showed fluctuations beyond normal variance. Locks had been bypassed. Security drones were inactive, sabotaged remotely. Someone had planned this. Someone precise. Someone audacious. My eyes darted across the schematics floating in midair. Nodes, conduits, pressure zones, all interlinked like a living neural network. Option 1. Trigger defensive protocols. Draw attention. Option 2. Recalibrate environmental variables. Isolate intruder. Option 3. Go directly to the princess. Decision made itself. I sent a series of micro-adjustments through the environmental matrix. Gravity subtly increased in strategic corridors, sound dampeners redirected, and security turrets received fake activation signals. Each movement rerouted energy without alerting the intruder. The palace reacted like a conscious organism under my fingertips. I didn't need weapons. I needed leverage, precision, timing, understanding the building better than the saboteur. "Human," the Chancellor's voice crackled through a private comlink, "you are diverging from protocol." "Yes," I said calmly, "but the protocol will get her hurt if we wait." The old bureaucrat hesitated. His fingers twitched over the approval console. "You are choosing direct engagement." "I'm going to her," I replied. Authorization implied. A click. A low hum. The Chancellor sighed. "Statistically questionable. But proceed." I moved fast. Every step calculated. Floors adjusted to reduce friction, doors opened slightly ahead of me. Gravity flux diverted minor obstacles. The environment became my ally. And then I saw her, Princess Aelira, cornered near the observation deck, crystalline filaments shimmering with alarm. The intruder's shadow loomed, arm extended toward her, energy weapon barely restrained by a force field projector malfunction. No one else could act without risk. I recalculated. Using the lattice nodes in the ceiling, I redirected a microcurrent to the floor, creating a localized vibration that tripped the assailant's balance. Simultaneously, I rerouted atmospheric pressure to increase drag subtly. She turned to me, eyes wide. "Go!" I shouted. Timing, anticipation, and understanding of physics, not brute force, shifted the advantage. The intruder stumbled, giving us a narrow path to safety. I extended a hand. "Trust me," I said. She didn't hesitate. Together, we moved down the corridor, the palace's engineered systems subtly bending around us, every step a testament to knowledge over violence, strategy over chaos. The threat had been neutralized, not by heroics, but by comprehension. And as I reached her side, she exhaled, eyes shining with something like relief and gratitude. The hidden corridors of the palace were a lattice of shadow and light, known only to maintenance crews and a handful of rogue historians. I led Princess Aelira through them, careful to avoid surveillance grids and pressure-sensitive floors. She didn't hesitate. Every step she took beside me radiated trust, complete, unreserved. Not the calculated caution of a royal heiress, but the instinctive confidence of someone who believed I would not fail. We moved swiftly, but silently, guided by subtle indicators I'd memorized from blueprints and structural data. Microgravitational adjustments under my control allowed her to navigate the narrow passages without alarm, and I subtly rerouted security sensors in real time. The palace, once a fortress, now bent around us, compliant to logic rather than fear. Outside the observation deck, the night air of the gardens hit us. The soft glow of bioluminescent flora lit her face, highlighting the relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "You did most of the work. I just made the environment slightly more agreeable." Her lips quirked, but she didn't let go of my hand until we reached the central atrium. There, the queen awaited, her posture poised yet unmistakably anxious. Elira ran forward, and for the first time in months, or perhaps years, she embraced her mother without restraint. The queen's arms tightened, and I saw her composure falter, if only briefly. The crowd had dispersed after the incident, leaving the balcony private. Queen Seralith then beckoned me aside. "Human," she said quietly, "you've done more than prevent harm today." Her gaze was measured, almost imperceptibly warm. "You've become an anchor." I stiffened slightly. "Your radiance, No words," she interrupted, shaking her head softly. "You are no longer a vulnerability in my court. You are strength." My mind scrambled to interpret the weight of that phrase. Not just competence, not just reliability, but something more permanent. "Your presence stabilizes more than infrastructure," she continued. "You have earned trust. You have earned her trust. And mine." There was no ceremony in her words, no political nuance, only sincerity. "I would be honored to continue serving," I said carefully. She inclined her head once. "Then you shall. Permanently. As liaison, advisor, and, if you choose, companion in matters that require discretion and fortitude." The title wasn't important. The significance was. "You've changed the palace," she said softly. "And the princess. And in doing so, you've changed me as well." I realized then that the moment of relief wasn't just for Elira. It was for all of us. No longer an accidental guest or temporary observer, I had become an integral part of their lives, a living testament that courage need not roar, and that trust, once earned, could reshape worlds. And as I watched mother and daughter exchange that quiet, profound look, I understood fully, this was no longer just about survival. This was about connection, loyalty, and the rare, fragile power of being chosen. Months had passed. The palace, once a labyrinth of tension and protocol, now hummed with quiet familiarity. I stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, observing a formal event that would have terrified me in my first week. 200 dignitaries, precise movements, endless ceremonial smiles, yet somehow it no longer felt alien. Princess Elira, glided past the crowd, perfectly composed in her formal robes, her eyes straight ahead. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, and she caught my gaze. She waved. Just a small motion of her hand, but it carried everything we had shared: trust, companionship, unspoken understanding. I returned the gesture subtly, unnoticed by anyone else. The acknowledgement felt more intimate than any public embrace. I belonged here now, not merely as a visitor, but as part of this intricate, living system of palace, family, and purpose. Later, the Queen hosted a family dinner in a private wing. The table was long and luminous, the plates and glasses reflecting pale starlight. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated with humor and light debate. I found my place among them, not at the edge, not under scrutiny, but inside the circle. Across the table, Elira brushed her hand against mine under the surface, almost imperceptibly, as if confirming that I understood the connection we shared. A subtle gesture, simple, human, and profoundly grounding. I let my fingers respond with equal discretion, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond forged in crisis and nurtured in ordinary moments. After dinner, I found myself on the balcony again. Twilight painted the sky in violets and blues, the same panorama that had held our earlier conversation with the Queen. The wind carried the faint chime of crystal harmonics, now familiar rather than intimidating. Elira appeared beside me, holding a tablet of technical schematics. "I need your input," she said softly, eyes bright with curiosity. "Of course," I replied, smiling. It wasn't just duty anymore, it was partnership, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. We leaned over the display together, hands occasionally brushing. Her laughter at a particularly stubborn energy fluctuation was warm, effortless, echoing through the balcony. I realized then that the palace, the family, and even the systems I had once recalibrated alone had become something more. Life here operated not just on protocol and rules, but on trust, connection, and shared understanding. And in that quiet twilight, as the palace settled around us like a living organism, I understood fully. Belonging is like a perfectly balanced system, every element aligned, every pulse measured, and every breath synchronized. Here, at last, I was home,